Okay, Rabotai. We are up to Chav Zayin Amud Bet. If you're following in the art scroll, that's 27b2. Let's begin. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, we're going to go back one chapter. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani says, Rish Lakish Amar, Rish Lakish says, Neshama Yitera, because of the extra Neshama. The reason why they didn't fast on Sunday was because of the extra soul. The Amar Rish Lakish, Neshama Yitera Nitena Bo Be'adam Be'erev Shabbat. The extra Neshama was given to a person on Erev Shabbat. As Shabbat comes in, Motzei Shabbat Notlin Otam Mimenu. On Saturday night, they take the Neshama away from him. Shneimar, as it says, Shabbat Vayinafash. And on the seventh day, God rested Vayinafash. And the Chachamim explain, what does it mean, Vayinafash? Kivan She Shabbat. Once the person experienced Shabbat, Vayinafash. Vay, woe, shame, avda, nefesh. We lost the neshama. So since the person loses the neshama on Motzei Shabbat, so to fast on Sunday would be an extra blow. The Chachamim did not want to do that. In fact, as we mentioned towards the end of last class, that's also the reason why we smell besamim on Saturday night. Because as the soul is leaving, just like if a person is fainting, they give them smelling salts to wake them up again. The idea of besamim is to enter into the new week invigorated, even though we just lost the neshama yitera. I always felt as well, that's why there's this custom that evolved, at least for the Sephardim, that when they smell the besamim, the whole shul goes, like, like they're almost being revived to kind of illustrate that point. Okay, now the Gemara is going to break apart the remaining parts of the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, B'yom HaRishon Bereshit v'yehi rakia. There's two readings in the Ma'amadot on the first day. The first one is Bereshit from the beginning, and the second one is Yehi rakia. The first one is 5 pesukim long, and the second one is 3 pesukim. Tana, the Braita teaches Bereshit in the beginning, Bishnayim in 2. You read it by 2 different people. Yehi rakia, second part, Be'echad, is read by 1. There's 5 pesukim in the first, 3 pesukim in the second. The Gemara says, what second? I understand the second part, that you would read it with 1 person in the Torah. Why? Because it's 3 pesukim, and you need a minimum of 3 pesukim in order for a person to be able to read from the Torah. The Bereshit, the first section that it should be read by 2 people, doesn't make sense. Hey pesuki haviyan. It's 5 pesukim, and if there's 5 pesukim and you have 2 people reading, that neither of them has 3 pesukim, or only one of them has 3 pesukim to be more exact. Vitnan, and we learned in the Mishnah, Hakoreh b'Torah alif hot migimel pesukim. Anyone who's reading the Torah, you can't read less than 3 pesukim. So if that's the case, how could you possibly have 2 readers dividing 5 pesukim in the first reading of the Ma'amadot? The Gemara says two opinions, Machloket, Rav, and Shmuel. Rav says as follows, Rav Amar Doleg. What does that mean? The second person goes back and he skips backwards and he reads Pasuk number 3. So first person reads Pasuk 1, 2, and 3. Second person goes back and reads Pasuk 3, 4, and 5. And then they both have 3 Pasukim. Shmuel says, no, Posek. The first guy reads Pasuk number 1, Pasuk number 2, and half of Pasuk number 3. And the second person reads from Pasuk, the second half of the third Pasuk, he reads the next 2 Pasukim. So, since they split the third Pasuk, it's as if each one has 3 Pasukim. Ask the Gemara 1 second. V'Rav damar doleg ma'itama lo amar posek. Rav that holds that you skip, i.e. that you go backwards and you reread the last Pasuk. Why doesn't he hold that you split the middle of the Pasuk? And then the Gemara in a second is going to ask why Shmuel did not hold like Rav. Kasava, the Gemara answers, Kol pesukat lo paske Moshe. Any pasuk that Moshe Rabbeinu did not split, he did not allow for a split in the middle of the pasuk. We don't have a tradition teaching us that you could split the pasuk in the middle of the verse. Anytime we have that, we say, Anan lo paskinande. We are not allowed to stop the pasuk in the middle. However, if there was a pasuk that Moshe Rabbeinu did that, then we could. But since in this instance there isn't a preset split in the pasuk from Moshe Rabbeinu, therefore we're not allowed to split the pasuk. So to have the first guy and the second guy, if to have the first guy and the second guy split a pasuk in half, Rav does not hold that you could do. V'Shmuel Amar posek. Shmuel holds posek. So obviously, we are now going to have to deal with the argument that the Gemara just put forward why Rav does not hold of Shmuel. Are we allowed to do that? V'Shmuel Amar posek mipaskinan. Are we allowed to do that? The Amar Rav Chanina said, Kira, there was a Rav Chanina who was called Rav Chanina Kira because his expertise was specifically in Pesukim. I worked very, very hard by Rav Chanina the Great, okay? In order to be able, that's not the same person, to be able to divide a pasuk in half. The only time he allowed me to do it was when I was teaching children, where the purpose of splitting the pasuk in half was because they could not finish an entire pasuk. Only in order to teach to learn. However, in exception to that case, Reb Chanina Agadol did not allow for the splitting of verses. So therefore, Shmuel, who says that you're supposed to split the pasuk, how does he deal with it? We learned this message from Reb Chanina Karab. Answers the Gemara, Shmuel, but Shmuel hatam taimamai. Shmuel answers, why did Reb Chanina Agadol allow Reb Chanina Karab to split the pasuk in that manner? Because mishum de lo efshar. Because the children couldn't learn a whole pasuk in one shot. They weren't able to learn the whole thing. They'd get distracted, they'd get confused. So therefore, in a place where it was not possible to not split the pasuk in half, still he was allowed. Hachanami lo efshar. So we're learning lo efshar from lo efshar. So any case which it's impossible to do, to read the whole pasuk without splitting it, we would split it because of a necessity to do so. However, Shmuel also agrees that in an area where it's not necessary, one is not allowed to introduce new pesukim, new splits in the middle of the pasuk. I'm imagining that the reason why that's the case is because there would be some instances where splitting the pasuk in the middle would be to detriment of understanding the pasuk properly. So therefore they forbid it in order to ensure that that would not happen. Now the Gemara is going to ask the other way. V'Shmuel Amar posek. Shmuel learns the opposite, that you split the pasuk in the middle. He doesn't learn doleg. Why does he hold that you didn't go back and read the last pasuk? Especially because the whole answer he just gave was that the only time you're allowed to do what he's doing, i.e. split the pasuk in half, is when there's no other option. If there's another option, like Rav, to go back a pasuk and read, so let him do that. Answers the Gemara, Gezerah mishum haniknasim. We have a gezerah, a decree, because of the people who came in the middle. Ugzerah mishum ayotzin, and also gezerah for those that leave early. That what that means is, let's say you have someone who comes in late. Anyway, the first guy, there's many ways of understanding this, but the first guy read up until pasuk number 3, okay? When does this guy come in? He comes in as the second guy is reading pasuk 3, 4, 5. He's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Guy number 1 read pasuk number 1 and 2, obviously. If that's the case, a person's allowed to read less than 3 verses. You're allowed to read for the Torah 2 verses. So he'll learn the wrong halakha from that case. Or, mishum yotzim. The person leaves after the first person reads pasuk number 1, 2, 3. He says, oh my gosh, there's only 4, 5 left. What's the second guy going to read? He's going to read 4 and 5. Therefore, you see that a person's allowed to read 2 pesukim. There's no idea that he has to read minimum 3 pesukim. So in order that we shouldn't learn the wrong halakha, therefore, we have a decree, a gezerah, that makes it efshar to do what Rav is saying. Doleg. So therefore, we're back to our lo efshar, and since we're back to our lo efshar, the halakha would be paskinan, just like we learn with teaching children, you're allowed to be posek in the middle of the pasuk. But what's interesting is no one really talks about the fact that when the Mishnah says that if you read 3 pesukim, you can't read less than 3, Shmuel holds that 2.5 is 3. How to help split the second, third pasuk? The answer is that minimum 3 and 2.5, according to Shmuel, is considered 3. How do I know that Shmuel holds that? Answer is because you see, he's explaining his whole gezerah is about the fact that someone will learn that you can't do minimum, you could do a 2 and not 3. So therefore, when the guy reads 2.5 pesukim, even if you came late or you came early, in either scenario, the person will understand that you have to read at least 3. Yes?
Is there amount of words that constitutes half of a pasuk?
We don't have a specification from Shemuel. So I would imagine that it's not necessarily, it's not less than 3 words. And the reason why is because the minimum amount of words that make up a pasuk in the Torah is 3 words. So I believe he would have asked you for at least that. But what's clear is that he's not telling you that it had to be 2.5, 51% of the pasuk. Because if he was saying that, guy number 2 would be reading 49% of the pasuk. Okay? All right. Ask the Gemara, Metvei. We asked the question on these 2 ideas from the Braita. Parasha Shisha Pesukim Korin Oto B'Shnayim. When you have 6 different Pesukim, 2 people are allowed to divide it 3 and 3. V'shel Chamisha. What if you had a chapter, a paragraph of 5 Pesukim? B'Yachid, 1 person reads, not 2. V'Marishon Koreh Gimel. What happens if you have a parasha of 5 Pesukim? And the first person actually reads 3. So he doesn't read all of it, he reads 3. Hasheni koreh shnayim meparasha. The person reads, the next person will read 2 from that paragraph. Ve'echad meparasha acheret. And 1 verse from the next chapter, from the next paragraph in the Torah, in order to complete the 3. V'yesh omrim gimel, and some people say, gimel, 3 from the new parasha, from the new paragraph. Because you don't start a new paragraph in the Torah unless you're going to read 3. So separate law obligates you not to read 1 in the next chapter, but to read 3 in the next chapter as well. So the guy will wind up reading the second 2 from the first chapter, and the first 3 from the new one. He'll wind up himself reading 5 Pesukim. The Gemara says, hold up. This doesn't work according to anyone. Lemanda amar doleg, according to Rav, who holds that you go back 1 pasuk. So now the guy read 3 out of 5. No problem. Let number 2 guy go back and read 1 more. Right? According to Ulemanda amar pasuk posek, and according to the person that holds that you read 2.5, lifsok. Why is the Mishnah saying? Why is the Braita saying that a paragraph of 5 pesukim has to be read by 1 person? Why? Let it be read by 2 people. 1 will read 2.5, and 1 will read 2.5. Answers the Gemara, Sha'ani Hatam. That's a different case. That Mishnah was not talking about the Ma'amadot, the Braita, excuse me. It was talking about regular Torah reading, and therefore the itle revacha, that you have space. You could do something else. So Rav also holds that you don't go back and read Pasuk 3, 4, and 5 when you can just read Pasuk number 6. Go forward. What's the problem? Shmuel also holds that you don't read 2.5 when you could read 3. Why? Because it's ideal to read 3. In fact, if you remember the answer of the Gemara, the answer of the Gemara for Shmuel was that you're only allowed to split a Pasuk when it's absolutely necessary. You have no other process. Here, when you're reading a regular Torah reading, where there's not a specific reading set for that reading, you're allowed to read however much you want. So of course, you read more. Shmuel also would say that you're not allowed to be posek in such a case. Here, in the Braita we're talking about, on the other hand, a regular Torah reading where you have leeway, so therefore Rav and Shmuel would both agree that you should read either the first person, you split 5, 1 person reads 5, or if 2 people are going to read it, because the first guy only read 3, so then the second guy will read 2 plus 1 from the new one, or 2 plus 3 from the second one, and we don't know. Rav or Shmuel could hold like either of those opinions in the Braita. Yes?
What do we do on Rosh Chodesh? When we go back, is this for any part of the reason? On Rosh Chodesh, we reread one of the Levi goes up and we reread the last pasuk.
So it's one complete inyan.
With nothing to do with this part.
No. In fact, that Gemara would be a question, that practice should be a question on this. Because this Gemara seems to be answering in order to fit. Rav would be the one it's similar to, right? But the Gemara over here just said that even Rav would not say this, right? In a scenario where you had the option to read something else. Yeah? So you should really read further. The only thing I would say is if you read further on Rosh Chodesh, the next element that comes after that, right? What comes after? If we were to read another part, it would be the next, it would be a different day, right? Because the Torah is talking about the different korbanot for the different days. So therefore, adding and going into another one would share the commonality with Ma'amadot, where you would be reading something that you're not supposed to be reading on the day of Rosh Chodesh. Okay. The Mishnah continues. Parasha Gedolah korim ota b'shnayim. B'shacharit u'b'musaf u'b'mincha korin al pien. The Mishnah gave us something which is very difficult to know how to read. Because it says, if you have a big parasha, a large enough portion, korin ota b'shnayim, you read it in two. Two people split it. If it has at least 6 pesukim. B'shacharit u'b'musaf u'b'mincha. And then on the other side, it says, mincha korin al pien, they read it by heart, they don't read it from the sefer. But we don't know if it's reading, the way you read the Mishnah is b'shacharit u'b'musaf, in which case musaf is also part of shacharit that you read from the Torah, or if you read it b'shacharit, period. U'b'musaf u'b'mincha, and musaf and mincha you read al pien, by heart. So we don't know which side musaf goes with. How do you read it? B'shacharit u'b'musaf korim oto b'sefer. Does Musaf get grouped with Shacharit and therefore it's done with the Torah? Or, right, or Dilma, or rather, Hachi Katani. Rather, you read it like this. B'shacharit korin oto b'sefer. In Shacharit, read it from the Sefer. U'b'musaf u'b'mincha, and Musaf mincha, korin oto al peh. You read it by heart like we read Shema. Which way does Musaf swing? To the first, to the Resha, to that which comes before, or to the Sefer, or to that which comes after. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Okay. So how do we decide which way we read this Musaf? Do we add Musaf to Shacharit, and therefore Musaf is also read from the Torah, or do we add Musaf to Mincha, and therefore Musaf is also read al peh, by heart, like the way you read Shema? The Gemara says, Tashma, let's decide this question. The Tanya, the Braita teaches, B'shacharit u'b'musaf nechlasin lebet hakneset. In Shacharit and in Musaf, they go into the shul, and they read v'korin k'derech shekorim kol hashana. They read the way they read the whole year. U'b'mincha yachid koreh ota ba'al peh. And on Mincha, the single person, koreh ota ba'al peh, he reads it by heart. Amar Rav Yossi, so you see clearly that the Mishnah, the Braita, divided it. Shacharit Musaf from the Torah, and Mincha, we read it by heart. Amar Rav Yossi says, V'chi yachid yachol likrot divrei Torah al peh b'tzibur. Can a single person read the Torah by heart for the community? So remember, the Ma'amadot was being read for all the people who are reading the Ma'amadot, right? Now you have this guy, he's reading without a Sefer Torah. He's reading it by heart. Ask the Gemara, do the other people fulfill their obligation? Because a person's reading it by heart? Ela, rather, kula nichnasin, everyone comes into the shul, all the people from the Ma'amad enter, and the korin ota al peh, they read it by heart, korin, in the same way that they read Shema. So, everybody reads in the Mincha, they read the portion by heart without a chumash. Without reading it from the Torah. And since everyone read it for themselves, each one is fulfilling their own obligation, but no one's obligation is being fulfilled by someone reading it ba'al peh. The Gemara continues, Kol yom shesh bo halel ein bo ma'amad. Any day you have halel, there's no ma'amad. And the Mishnah then continued and said that on the days of the Atzeh Maracha, the days where they had the Korban Etzim, if you remember what was the Korban Etzim, there were families that during the time when they reconstituted the temple, that they did not have enough wood to be able to bring the Korbanot. So they drew lots, and different families brought wood for the Beit HaMikdash, and to commemorate that, they did a separate Korban, if you will, which was the Korban of the burning of the Etzim. So on the day that family donated wood to be able to allow the Beit HaMikdash to operate, when they didn't have enough wood, they would take wood, bring it onto a separate part of the Mizbeach, and burn it, and that was the Korban Etzim. And since they did it in a time when the Beit HaMikdash did not have wood, the Chachamim instituted that should be forever. And this is why they had these days. The Gemara, but the Mishnah said that on the day that you had the Korban Etzim, there was we would cancel the Ma'amadot for Ne'ilah, but not for Mincha. The Gemara asks, "My fresh ben zelezeh, how come you canceled the Ma'amadot, the reading of these verses and the practices for Ne'ilah and not for Mincha? It doesn't make sense." The Gemara says, "Halalu divrei Torah, ve'halalu divrei sofrim." When it comes to Mincha, Mincha is from the Torah. When it comes to Ne'ilah, Ne'ilah is not from the Torah. So therefore, for something that came from the Torah, we did not cancel the Ma'amadot for the Korban Etzim. But when something did not come from the Torah, that we canceled for the Korban Etzim. Now, important to remember, Mincha is not Mideoraita. And if you look carefully, the Gemara does not say Mideoraita, which means it's from the Torah. It says Halalu Divrei Torah. These are words of the Torah. What does that mean? When it comes to Mincha, Shacharit, and Arbit, each one of the three prayers we pray every day, we have a pasuk that tells us, that references or that illustrates these concepts of Shacharit, Mincha, and Arbit by Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. But when it comes to Ne'ilah, we have no pasuk that mentions it. So we have no asmachta. And what this teaches us is that there's a difference between Derabanan and Deoraita. But there's also a difference to the asmachta that we have. Asmachta means the thing that we lean on. The Torah never says to you, you must pray Shacharit, you must pray Mincha. But when the Chachamim said, you must pray Shacharit, you must pray Mincha, we were able to find an allusion to it in the Torah. And there's a difference between when we can find an allusion in the Torah and when we can find an allusion in the Divrei Sofrim or in other places, including Divrei Kabbalah.
Korbanot, but it's Oraita.
Korbanot Deoraita, sure. Whole Sefer.
Right. So
But Yikra.
and Shacharit and Korbanot and Mincha.
Yes, but the prayers of Shacharit and the concept of the prayers of Shacharit and Mincha and Arbit are not Korbanot. They were instituted to commemorate the Korbanot. Okay? Yeah. The Gemara now continues. Ziman atzeh kohanim ve'ha'am. The Mishnah told us that these are the times that we have all these Korban Etzim. And the people would come and they would celebrate and the families would bring wood once again like they used to bring wood back in the day when they didn't have enough. Why did the Mishnah tell us this? Amru, to tell us, when they came back to build the Beit HaMikdash, lo matzu etzim b'lishka. They went to the lishka, to the area where they would have the wood, and there was nothing there. Amdu elu vitnadu mishelahem. And these families that I mentioned, that we said in the Mishnah, they came and made these donations. The prophets that were there at the time ruled, even if this room became filled with wood, atzim, these families again should bring this korban, sacrifice of wood, and it would be commemorated for all time. Shinei Amar, as it says, V'agoralot hipalnu al korban etzim, and we did a lottery as to who would bring the korban etzim. Hakohanim alivim ve'a'am, all three segments of the people. La'avi lebet Elohenu, to bring to the Beit HaMikdash, the Beit Avotenu, to the house of our fathers. Li'itim mezumanim b'shana, to specific times, shana b'shana, year after year. Leva'er ha-mizbeach Hashem, in order to burn on the mizbeach of God, Elokeinu, kekatuv b'Torah, like it says in the Torah. So therefore, that was the reason why we discussed all these different things on the dates that they were, because it has a ramification, not just in the past, but also for the future. Tanu Rabbanan. Our rabbis taught, Ma hayu b'nei gonvei Eli u'bnei kotzei ketziot. We said earlier on in the Mishnah that there was a family of Gonvei Eli, the people who stole, or what's it called? Who stole Eli, which means the tool that you would muddle with, like the pestle is the name of the tool, but it's the hard, blunt object that you would use in the thing that you're crushing something with. Ubnei kotzei ketziot, and those that cut the fig cutters. Kotzei ketziot are generally the figs that are cut, and then they would dry them. Amiru, they explained the name of these families. Pamachat gazra machu gzra Yisrael. Once there was a decree that they passed on Am Yisrael, shelo yaviu etzim l'malacha. They should not be able to bring wood, because they knew if they didn't bring wood, they would be unable to do the service in the Beit HaMikdash. V'shelo yaviu bikurim the Yerushalayim. They should not bring as well bikurim to Eretz Yisrael. Ve'oshivu pros daot ala derachim, and they put on the roads up to Yerushalayim, they put police. Kederech she'oshiv Yeravam ben Nevat. The same way that Yeravam ben Nevat also had people, sentries planted on the roads, that the Jewish people should not go up to the Beit HaMikdash for the regel. What did Yeravam ben Nevat do? He put idols at the forks in the road. Every time there were roads ascending to Jerusalem, he had police there, he had idols there. The people would come with their korbanot to bring in the Beit HaMikdash, and he would say, what are you going to the Beit HaMikdash? Just slaughter it here next to this statue. And he turned single-handedly the Jewish people to idol worship. What was Yeravam's desire not to have the Jews go to the temple? Because he knew that when the Jews would go up to the temple, they would see that there was another king. Yeravam was the first Israelite king that did not come from Shevet Yehuda after David went up to the throne. So you had David, you had Shlomo, you had Rehavam. And during that time, the kingdom split. So there was a king from the descendants of David HaMelech, from Yehuda. There was a king that did not come from the Shevet Yehuda. And Yeravam ben Nevat decided, if the Jews go to the Beit HaMikdash, what's going to happen? There's going to be a reading of the Torah. And only one person is allowed to sit in the Azara. And who is that? A king that comes from the tribe of David, through Yehuda, through the tribe of David. He knew that he would be forced to stand while Rehavam would sit. And he understood that that would mean that all the people would see that who is the true king of Israel? The other guy. Yerovam said, forget it, not happening. So he decides, for his honor, his ego, and his power, to destroy Am Yisrael's connection with Borei Olam, and he puts these sentries on the road. So the Gemara says, they had these sentries on the road same way, and they would not allow people to bring wood to the Beit HaMikdash. Okay? Now it seems that there's a disagreement as to when, if you look in the notes, there's a disagreement as to when this took place. Right? We're either talking about Rome, Greek, or during the time of Yeravam. Yeah. It would make sense, the opinion as well of Yeravam, because that's why, what's the Gemara telling me, just like Yeravam? Well, I don't know what centuries are, and I don't know what the road to Jerusalem is, that you need an example for it, just like Yeravam did. Why do we need to tell you that? Unless it's telling you that according to that opinion, that just like Yeravam on the regel didn't let them go, he also didn't let them go for Bikurim and to squash the, what's it called? So according to that opinion, that would make sense. According to other opinions, it just seems to be like a random, connection. Oh, you know what? Oh, as well, Yeravam ben Nevat. Okay, Hazaku Baruch. Now I know what centuries are. Okay, let's carry on. So anyway, Ma'asuk Sharim Shivot Ador. What did the people who were righteous during that door do virechet, and they were afraid of avonot, of not bringing the bikurim? Heviu saleh bikurim. They brought baskets of bikurim v'chipum b'kitziot. They covered the whole top with figs. Unitalum ve'alu al kitvehem. And they took the baskets ve'eli, and they took the pestle, the thing to smash them on their shoulders. When they came to the areas, those roads that led to Jerusalem, and they saw the sentries there, Amru lahem, they said to Nechem, where are you going? Amru lahem, they would tell them, we're going to press all these figs into igulei dvela. They would take all the figs and they would press them together to make like a sheet of figs. Okay, and that's why we have this what's it called? That's why we have this pressing device with us. I have the tool, but I need to go to a place where they have the molds, right? The hard molds, so I can put all the figs in it, and then it makes a round igule dvela of the circle. Okay, and that's where we're traveling. Ube'elisha al kitafenu, and that's what we're going to use. Kivan shavru mehem. Once they passed, iterum besalim ve'evium l'Yerushalayim. That's when they would decorate the baskets, as was the custom for Bikurim, and then they would go up to Yerushalayim. So therefore, in deference and in reverence to the fact that these people risked punishment from whoever it was that was not allowing them to go up to Yerushalayim, we called the families Gonve Eli and Kotz'e Ketziot. They were called by the name of their Mesirut Nefesh. The Braita continues, Tana, hen b'nei Salmai hanetufot. These are the families of Salmai from Netofat. No, Netofa. Why? Because it's not Fati. So the Bnei Salmai were the people from Notfa, and they did very similar. Tana Rabbanan, Mahen Bnei Salmai hanotfa. What does that mean? These people, Notfa. What does that name come from? What did they do? Amiru. Pamachad Gazra Malchut Gazra Israel. There was a decree against the Jews. Shiloh aviyu etzim il maracha. They should not bring the etzim, the wood, for the mizbeach. Ve'oshivu prosdaot al derachim kedech she'oshiv Yeravam menevat al derachim. And they instituted, they put these guards on the road, just like Yeravam menevat did. Shlo Yisrael regel. Masu Yerechet shebaoto ador. What did the Yerechet do in that time? Keviu gezerehen v'asu sulamot. They took chopped wood and they made ladders. Ve'nichu al kitefin. And they put it on their shoulders. And they went. When they got there, where are you going? They said, we're going to go get from very high, we're going to bring down trees, birds from their nests. With the ladders that we have on our shoulders. Once they passed by, they took apart the ladders made of the wood that they had just built, and they were taking to Yerushalayim, and they would use that wood to burn on the Mizbeach. So they had an easier job than the other people. Because by the other people, what did they need to do? They needed to hide Bikurim underneath the figs. God forbid that they would look underneath the figs, they'd get caught. Here, there was nothing else. They were bringing etzim, so they made the ladders out of the pieces of wood, and then they just dismantled it and they brought it back up to Yerushalayim. And on these people, and everyone liked them, it says Zecher Tzadik Yiracha. When we mention a tzaddik, it brings it's a blessing. And on Yeravam ben Nevat and his friends, it says Shem Rishaim Yirkav. The name of Rishaim should rot away. We don't need more of that in our nation. We have to finish here. I have PTA for my daughter.